AI is great for productivity, but I'm afraid that we will sacrifice human creativity for productivity. For me, I want it to collaborate with me, but I never want it to replace me. I still want to always be in the driver's seat using a technology, and I think we should keep it that way. I define innovation as creating a new future by transforming ideas into value, which is a very broad statement, but it means it's applicable to anything and everything. One that I created, which I think is a lot of fun, I call it worst idea ever. I want you to think about what are the worst possible ways you could solve that problem.
We are during the eCommerce Poland conference in the studio live setting, so people can actually walk in and watch us record it. And this conference is done by Snowdog and Iron Plane companies, and it's dedicated to unified commerce idea. And my guest is American. So,
American and Canadian.
And Canadian.
Yep.
And that's why we have to speak English,
That's
because
right.
You haven't learned Polish.
I have not learned
yet.
Polish.
Well, you still have time.
That's right.
And this is Leo Chen, founder of Abound Innovation, holder of 55 US patents, creator of Abound Innovation Process, Lego Serious Play, trainer and speaker, and someone really dedicated to the idea of innovation.
Yes.
And that's also something that you have been talking about during this conference, because you just have had your keynote.
That's right.
And
just
I grabbed
keynote.
you right from the
exactly.
keynote and like, hey, come here, let's talk.
Let's talk.
Because I really would like this podcast to go deep into the idea of innovating in e-commerce. This podcast is dedicated to people in Poland mostly.
Okay.
But it's going to be also presented on the channels of Snowdog and Iron Plane. So it's going to also go wider than just to Polish audience. But in my podcast in Poland, I want to really share with leaders, managers, specialists in the field of e-commerce different ideas on how they can scale in e-commerce, how they can enter e-commerce. We want to touch business topics, some maybe more specialist topics as well, but today I really want you to tell us how to innovate in e-commerce, because it's not such an easy thing
Let's do it.
say. So actually my first question to you, because in e-commerce we're constantly in this daily grind, like we have to make results. E-commerce is about sales.
Right.
So every founder is dedicated to making sure that the e-shop will make more revenue, and this revenue will actually come in lower costs than, let's say, a month ago. So a lot of daily grind, but now this AI revolution is making us look at our e-commerce businesses from a very different way.
Right.
There's so many new things that we can do, but it's not so easy to do it because it requires some change, right? Of behavior maybe. But first question I wanted to ask you is, what is really innovation, and how do you define innovation? What is innovation? What is optimization? If I just change my checkout on my e-commerce, is this innovation?
Right.
Or not?
Great question. So I define innovation as creating a new future by transforming ideas into value.
Okay.
Which is a very broad statement, but it means it's applicable to anything and everything. Okay. So creating a new future by transforming ideas into value. So optimization could be looked as a way of innovation. In the innovation world, I used to, back when I was in corporate, we would define innovation in very different ways. Like there's incremental innovation, which is kind of like optimization, what you just described.
So still innovation.
So still innovation. And then we would describe something as what was called adjacent innovation, which means it's beside the work that you do, but not exactly it. And then we would have breakthrough innovation, which is like this other stuff. I don't talk about that anymore because I find it complicates what innovation is. I think when we look at innovation as improving life, if we change status quo to something better, we can look at that as innovation. And the important reason why I don't talk about it in these different ways anymore is because a lot of people already have all these conceptions of it. And if they don't see themselves doing that, then they say, oh, I'm not an innovator. I don't know how to innovate. I can't innovate. And they exclude themselves from that word. I'd rather you see yourself as an innovator, because when you see yourself, then you can make change and all of that, all the good stuff that innovation brings. So I don't even talk about that anymore. And I don't even, you just talked about return on investment, right? In e-commerce, I'm sure you want more sales.
Yeah.
Innovation actually is the same way. A lot of people look at innovation as, did you make me billions of dollars? And if we look at, I mean, we want that, sure, but I've never done that. So that means I'm not innovative and I've never innovated. So I try to make it more to a capability that everyone has within them that they can actually exercise. And then when you do that, then they'll do all those other things that we want. But they first need to be able to see that, hey, I can innovate in my life.
Okay. Do you have some examples of unobvious innovations?
Yeah. So actually, just the keynote I just did, the two that I shared, two examples. So there was a Dutch e-bike company called, I'm blanking on them. There's a Dutch e-bike company, and they're shipping their products to the United States.
Okay.
And the problem was with that, normally it wouldn't be a problem, but when it was arriving to America, 25% of them were being damaged by mishandling of the carrier, which is a really bad thing. So they thought to themselves, what would make them handle it better?
Yeah.
So they said, what do Americans really love? And they said the answer was televisions. So they're like, okay, Americans love television. So they printed a picture of a television and printed it on their e-bike box. And it just so happened that the bike boxes were the same size and weight as televisions. And that reduced carrier damage by 80%.
Wow, because someone who looked at
because they're like, oh, it's a TV. We have to be very careful. It's a television. And that was actually an innovation, because it solved a problem. It had value, and it was great. And then their fans loved it. Like, they thought this was this great example. So that's what they did. And the other example I just shared was rolling luggage. So rolling luggage was invented in 1970. Which is after we put someone on the moon, which is crazy if you think about it.
Seriously?
Yeah, like rolling luggage is much easier than putting someone on the moon. But the way the inventor created it, his name was Bernard Sato, he was going through pain. So I always like to think about innovation as looking at what are the pain points that our customers face, or even pain that we face, and what's a new way that we might solve that. So back in the day, you either carry your luggage or you hire someone to drag it around for you, right? So he came home from a vacation in 1970s, his family vacation. He was carrying luggage himself. And he gets stuck in customs, because everybody gets stuck in customs. While he was there, he noticed a worker moving heavy machinery around on a pallet effortlessly. And he looked to his wife and he said, that's what we need for luggage. So the very next day he goes to work, he goes to a wardrobe trunk, he removes 4 wheel casters off of it, he gets a bag, a suitcase, and he gets a strap, and he puts it all together. And that's how rolling luggage was born. So that was innovation, right? It was a new way to solve a problem, but no one had ever done it before. And all of those resources were free. The 4 wheels were already there. He already had the bag, and he took a strap. And he literally says, I put a strap on the bag on the front, I pulled it, and it worked. And then poof, rolling luggage was born. So that's kind of an everyday example of innovation. It seems like it's really big because it's a product innovation, but all those materials were at home. You just stuck them together, and in new bag was born.
Both of these ideas make me think, wow, this is so easy. But then, the world is progressing, and there's so many things that already have been invented. But what's really right now in our face is AI.
Yeah.
And my question is, using AI, you can actually innovate much faster. You can create ideas, you can prototype. We just were, before this talk, we were recording a podcast about AI-assisted engineering. And we were talking about how fast you can build things, how fast you can build software actually right now. And you can solve problems much faster, but we also had this conclusion that you actually have to know what to solve. Right?
Yes, you need the right problems to solve. That's
and
right.
you need to identify these ideas and identify these problems. So my first question is how do you see AI messing in this innovation system or idea? What's your take on this?
Yeah, so I'm actually someone that doesn't talk a lot about AI publicly, and it's not because I have anything against it. I think it's a very important technology, but I never wanted to replace human capability. And I think there's a danger, especially for people that are new in learning innovation and creativity, to just let the robot do it.
Yeah.
And I have a creative design background myself. I went to graphic design school growing up and all of that. And I think there's a decision point we have to make. I think there is a productivity. AI is great for productivity, but I'm afraid that we will sacrifice human creativity for productivity.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you an example. I don't call myself a creator, but I create a lot online and do content and all of that. And there's lots of AI tools that can create the content for you. So I can have AI create podcasts for me, blogs for me, and all of that. And it could even sound like me, but I lose the ability to even practice that if I give it to the robot. And could it do the same thing? Maybe. Maybe it's not 100% as close as Leo, but maybe it's 95%. Do I just assign it away to something else to do it? So if I don't practice creativity, if I don't practice innovation, I'll lose it. Like any muscle that we have, if you don't use it, you will lose it. I'm afraid if we have an over-reliance on AI, it will cause us harm in the future. That's not to say that it's not useful for some things. I think AI is great for things like data processing. It can summarize huge amounts of data much better and faster than I could. There's some things that we can assign to it that I think are useful. But for me, I always want to keep creativity and innovative thinking on my side. I might collaborate with AI because it's great for that, but I never want it to be in the driver's seat. I want to be the driver of the car.
Yeah, because if we actually let AI to be in the driver's seat, then where are we?
Where are we exactly?
I mean, in the end of the day, most of my friends and people I interact with, people in my company, we actually love what we do.
Exactly.
We want to create, we want to innovate, we want to solve problems. So now, how to collaborate with AI in the way that it really makes the work still fun and productive. And cheaper, maybe, in a way, right?
You know, I do see AI, so I'm a solopreneur. I don't have like a team that works with me and all of that. I find it a great collaborator. So if I'm working on like a keynote talk, for example, I might want to name it something and I can come up with some pretty good ideas, but then I want it to bounce it off something. And if my wife's not around and I can't get her thoughts, I'll say, hey, AI, what do you think of this talk? And I'll collaborate as if it were the human. But it's the same thing, even if we're working with humans. Do you want to give another human all the work that you do, like just them take over you, or do you want to collaborate with them and work together, right? So I think it depends what role we want AI to play for us. For me, I want it to collaborate with me, but I never want it to replace me. And if it replaces me, then I'm like, am I no longer, what am I doing? So I still want to always be in the driver's seat using a technology. And I think we should keep it that way. It's a technology that's very helpful. So like you said, it's great for prototyping ideas, software development. You can get to scale and test things so much faster than before. I think it enables innovation to be accelerated because now we can work at a faster pace and it can do things that would have taken a lot longer. So it's definitely an advantageous tool that we have, but never let it replace you because you're human, because you're creative. I mean, I think we're born innovative and creative. If we don't use those, we'll lose our humanity.
So how should someone start innovating? Let's say they are the founder or leader in the e-commerce business or e-commerce team. As we said, a lot of daily grind stuff, a lot of sales stuff, a lot of like last minute things. But now, as you said, like we want to start innovating. So where to start, with the problems or ambitions, or do you have any?
Yeah, you actually touched on it earlier. I'm of the opinion that we should always, I think there's two sides of this, but looking for pain or opportunity. So pain is always something people need solved. So it's like, what problems do we solve? Well, if you look at your customer base, what are the pains that they're experiencing now? It could be with your product, but it could just be daily life things that they're experiencing. When people have pain, they're going to pay you to solve it, because people don't like living with it, right? And sometimes I call it, we create these duct tape solutions. So we try to figure out these mediocre solutions that don't actually solve the problem, but it's like good enough. But those solutions aren't good enough. If there's a company that has an answer for you, you will hire them, you'll buy their service, you'll pay for their product. So what are the pain points that your customers are facing today? And that's what Bernard Sato did, right? When he invented rolling luggage, he himself experienced the pain of carrying it. He's like, man, is there a better way to do this? Yes, there is. Look, that guy is moving stuff around on wheels, right? So he put wheels on and he solved the problem. Actually, it was just for himself, but that problem was replicated around the world. Everyone had that same problem. So if I always say is we have to thoroughly understand what the problem to solve, and once we figure that out, then we can create the solution. That part is the easy part, actually.
So you would say, what, talking to your clients, I don't know, surveying them.
Surveying them, you can observe them. So like even if you were to watch an interaction with your customer, maybe it's online or in person, look for those points when they start getting frustrated or their voice starts going, they're starting to say grr. Like what are those grr points that they have, and help understand what that is, and then create a solution for them to be solved. And I think because all of our companies are different, there's always going to be unique problems that customers will have with your product or service. And so what are the ways in which you can solve that? And I can give you an example. I used to work for Chick-fil-A, which is a big restaurant chain in America. And one of the problems that they had, which is a great problem, was they had too many customers. Okay, so they were so popular.
That's a good problem.
Yes, a good problem. So they had so many customers, they would have long queues, which, back in the day for food, it's just kind of like you just wait until you get in line and then you get your food. Well, what Chick-fil-A invented was what was called upstream ordering. So they actually took orders while you were in line and sent it to the kitchen. So by the time you got to the kitchen, the food was ready for you, as opposed to you getting to the line, to the front, placing your order, waiting for your food, and then getting it. So the kitchen was pre-prepped with your order while you were in line. So that sort of helped to mitigate the line issues, because those orderings were being sent in advance. They still have to wait a little bit, but it's not as long as before. So Chick-fil-A had their own problem of too much success, and then they had to solve that with an innovation.
That's a good problem to have, and easy to identify.
Easy to identify. Yes, you had the really, really long lines. Yes.
But then there's also an ambition, right?
Yes.
There's ambition, or you said opportunity. And how do you look for that?
Yeah, there's that quote from Henry Ford. It said, if I were to ask customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse, right? So sometimes customers can't envision what that solution is.
I think Steve Jobs was the second one.
Yeah, Steve Jobs with the iPod, right? And so, I think it's always started, I think it still is rooted somewhat in pain though, right? Because with the iPod, Steve saw that people were carrying all these like CDs and cassette tapes. I think back in the day it was cassette tapes. They're carrying all their music collection, and it was just cumbersome. But nobody saw that as pain. It's just, it is what it is. So it was still rooted in a pain point, but because he had an innovative mind, discovered a better solution. So I think it still roots into what are better ways in which we can solve problems for people, and because the only danger is if we're only focused on opportunities, we can turn to the Segway. And the Segway is a great invention, but not to what the inventor thought. He thought everybody would have Segways, but they're the portable devices used for like mall cops and things like that, right? So he created a solution that didn't really solve a problem that existed, so it didn't have mass market appeal. So a lot of people would say that was a failed innovation. So we never want to get to that point also. So that's why it's always rooted in pain. But there's a better way to solve that than what they see, like an opportunity like the iPod, for example, then I think that will really help.
But how do you create space for this in the organization? And as you said, like, Steve Jobs, he had this innovative mindset.
Yeah.
Does everyone have an innovative mindset?
We can develop it. Okay. So I like to...
Two questions, probably.
Question. Yeah.
One is like, how do you create space? And second, like, who should innovate?
Yes.
Everyone, but maybe how to make them?
Yeah. The first thing is actually very simple. So I worked in corporate. People are always too busy.
Yeah.
Innovation takes time. It's just a fact. So if we want to be able to think differently about our work, we have to craft a space for it. And the way we can do that is intentionally taking over a calendar. So for example, let's say once a week at your lunch break, 1 hour you designate for thinking, looking at existing problems or just giving yourself some margin and white space. When we're overcrowded in our brains, we don't have time or the ability to process. Google was famously known for something called 20% time. So 20% time meant that 20% of your work week could be used for other things other than your actual work. Can you imagine that if all corporations gave you 1 day out of 5 to just think?
But then when you're a smaller business owner, then sometimes you think like, do I really have time for this? Because there's so many things that need my attention, and if I don't do it, like I don't generate revenue, etc. So But I mean, I agree. It's about discipline probably, because
It
otherwise
is.
this 1 hour you can spend on Instagram just kind of feeding your brain with some stupid stuff
Yeah.
because you're tired, or you can try to give yourself space.
The thing is, if we just continue the same way, we will always do things the same way.
Yeah.
And if we don't give ourselves that freedom or that margin of time to think differently, for the most part, the people that aren't kind of naturally wired to do that, they won't. Right. I always like to use my wife as an example. She works in HR. She will kind of keep things as is. She just does her job, that type of thing. And unless she's pushed to think different, she'll just keep it as is. And we start businesses to keep the bus running, right? We don't want the bus to change into a hovercraft. We want the bus to be a bus. So we design companies just to run things as is. That's what makes them successful. Is the whole way corporations are started is to make things work. Not to change it, it's just to keep it working, right? So it will always end up being that way. But unless we want to give our employees the time to think, they will always do things the same way, unless they're naturally wired that way and they're just like, oh, I'm always coming up with new ideas. So I think strategically we have to give people margin of time to say, hey, I want you to take a day, maybe it's not 20% every single week, but maybe it's a day out of the month or 2 days out of the month where you can start to think about things.
And what is the assignment you should give them? Go innovate?
I would actually go back to saying, what are problems or pains that you currently have that you wish were better, right? So maybe in your work, it's a process that could be changed. A lot of people just live with the way things are, and it's just because, again, you just keep it as it is, right? So I would say, what are the pains, what are the things that frustrate you at work, that really bother you, that you wish were different? Or look at it from your customer's perspective. What do you think would be better for your customers? Or what are the things that you're hearing from them that they say, hey, if you know what, I wish you could do this for us. Look at one of those two perspectives. Those then become the areas for innovation to start happening. Because once you identify the pain, then you can come up with solutions because there's a problem to solve. So we can even talk about that, because I have lots of techniques that you can use to start generating ideas.
Give me some. Give me some.
So one that I created, which I think is a lot of fun, I call it worst idea ever. And the way it works is, so whatever your problem is, I want you to think about what are the worst possible ways you could solve that problem.
Oh, wow.
Like literally the worst idea. So, and I want you to think like illegal, things that would get you fired, things that would get you thrown in jail, like really terrible ideas.
Okay.
You're not going to actually do them, but I just want you to put your brain into that space. And once you've come up with a list of really terrible ideas that are atrocious, that you would never do, right? And you should laugh because they're this ridiculous. I want you to think about what are the opposite principles of those ideas. And what that will do is it will free you into new ways of thinking about solving your problem or challenge. And it's also lots of fun. So let's just say we're thinking of how do we improve training at our organization? What are some ideas that you think are terrible? What are the things you would never do to improve training?
I heard one at the recent conference. It's like, if I don't see you training, I will fire you immediately.
Okay, so fire everyone that's not learning, right? Or maybe it's like, we're going to make everybody cry once they walk in. Like, we're going to shame them publicly. I will shame you once you walk in.
On LinkedIn.
Yeah. You'll have trauma afterwards. These are terrible ideas. So if I might think of the flip of that, so instead of sending you to the trauma center, what if I made such a welcoming environment that you felt so positive and energetic once you walked into the room, right? I felt immediately welcomed, embraced as a person. I felt known, I felt seen. How would that shift the training experience? That would probably put you in a really good mental state, like you're feeling energized and encouraged.
But I totally agree with you, because I came back from this conference and it was a discussion about training people to use AI more in their workspace and e-commerce. Very relevant, right? And the idea came from one of the panelists that I was discussing with, and he said, yeah, like in our company we will just not give raises, or we will fire people if we don't see them using AI in their job. I was like, wow, not really with the values of my organization, but I brought it to my management team and I said, like, look at this idea. And they're like, you are crazy. But then we started innovating, because we were like, okay, but maybe we actually have a bonus system. What if we could improve on our bonus system and give people some extra points for the fact that they, for example, created some AI solution that makes them life easier.
Right.
So a good idea came out from this, right?
Yes.
Even though the first one was, from my perspective, really terrible.
Yeah. So that's how you do it. You start on the negative, terrible ideas, fired, sent to jail, not post on social media, all those things. And then when you think of the flip, it's just a different way to approach thinking. And anybody can use this technique. It's easy to do, and it's actually quite a lot of fun too. So that's a way to start thinking about problems, right? Think about the pain points that you're facing at work or your customers facing. Use worst idea ever and see what type of ideas come on the back end of that. And
that's another of my questions, because, okay, so let's say in the organization, like, where do you, okay, it's me as a leader who should have the space on my management board, or how should I bring in other people from the organization to the picture? Like, to give each of them a space for this, or do a brainstorm with everyone? Like, sometimes it's difficult, to do it together. Sometimes a big group actually doesn't help people to be innovative and to feel free to, for example, throw this worst idea because they might feel, I don't know, somehow ashamed maybe, or how do you create the space that everyone can do it?
So I refer to that as psychological safety. I think psychological safety to me is the foundation of innovation, because I always say that innovation is both exciting and also terrifying at the same time, because when we create ideas, it is an exciting thing to do, but we also don't know if they're going to work or not.
Exactly.
And I need to have the freedom with another colleague to share my ideas in a way that you're not going to say, oh, Leo, those are terrible. Why would you ever think that? Exactly. We tried that 5 years ago and it didn't work, and then just start to shame me and blame me and make me feel awful. I need to feel that I can trust you and share a space of ambiguity together. And so I think it's not even just on leaders. Every single person can create psychological safe spaces for others, where I might say to you, we're in an open space. You can share whatever you want. Anything goes, anything's on the table. Let's just try and see what happens. And if we create space like that for others, people then will be able to share whatever's on their mind. I know that not every idea that we share will be implemented, right? That's just reality. But it's not about that. It's to have the space that we can just explore together. We can explore the ideas that may be implemented. We can explore the ideas that won't be implemented. But we won't know that until we can put them all on the table and have a conversation. So I always like to invite people to say, I'll be like, hey, what do you think about that? Right. And when I worked at Chick-fil-A, a lot of my corporate experience was there. I led innovation programs where I taught people how to innovate. But I never said to them, I'm the only person that knows how to do this. I would invite even the people in the community that were following me. I'd say, I want your feedback. I'm like, I'm doing the best that I got, but I want your thoughts too. Come co-partner with me, co-create with me, come join me, and let's do this together. And if there are things that aren't working, I want you to tell me, and I will change it. Or if you have better ideas, let me know. So co-creation and collaborating is really important, and we can model that behavior to people, because some people have ideas, but they don't feel safe to share it with you. But when you create that opening to them, then they're like, oh, I have tons of ideas. And you're like, oh, well, let me know. What do you want? What do you think, right? But we can also model the opposite behavior, where we can pretend like, oh, I'm the expert in the room. I know everything. I know better than you. And that really shuts down the ability for people to start innovating. So we need to create those safe spaces for people to do that.
Yeah, I think it's a lot about company cultures, and what you said about AI at the beginning of this conversation, I think is becoming more and more relevant, because I believe that to be really effective nowadays in e-commerce, which is the space that I understand probably the most, is to understand the business and to talk about new solutions. If you don't invite your team to talk about it, they will never be able to even learn it, because some of them might be still at their junior level. They have to understand the big picture. If the whole conversation right now is just about how we make things faster, easier, how can we implement AI and cut costs, this in a way can kill innovation, right?
Yeah.
So there's like a two-sided sword in the whole AI situation now. But tell me as well about Lego Serious Play, because that's something that you use to
Yes.
trigger or like ignite innovation. How can you use Lego for it? I mean,
Yes. So it's been around since the late 90s, early 2000s.
yeah.
Lego Group developed it. It's if for the listeners that have never heard about Lego Serious Play, I like to call it's Lego for adults in business.
Mm.
And a lot of people can look at it as a toy, but it is a vehicle of ideas and communication.
Okay.
So the way it works is Lego Group developed specific kits for Lego Serious Play. Anybody can buy them, so you can just go on Lego's website
Okay.
and look at it. But the pieces are hand selected for storytelling and metaphor. So they're things like, I like to reference this in corporate because, there's always the proverbial elephant in the room, or, there's things like that. So there's like a Lego elephant, for example. There's Lego skeletons and things like that. Because unfortunately, corporate is not always great. I mean, most of it is, but sometimes we have the negative side. And the way it is you build Lego models, and the Lego models become the basis of knowledge. That's what you talk about. So I might ask you, for example, one of the use cases is team building and team development. So I might ask you, what's a strength that you bring to the team? The way, instead of you just talking about that, you actually would build your strength in a Lego model, and then the Lego model becomes what we talk about. So you can say, well, my strengths are this and this, and you'll point to things that you built in the Lego model that you built, and that becomes the basis of foundation for knowledge. And it's wonderful because, like, we know that phrase that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, when you're talking about it, you see the picture of what someone built, and the meaning becomes so much more deep and more insightful with using something like Lego, because you see the picture of what they're talking about in addition to the words that they're saying. I believe there's 3 styles of learners. There's kinesthetic, which is body movements and things. There's visual, which means you learn by seeing, and then there's auditory, learn by hearing. With Lego Serious Play, you have all 3, because you see the model, you're building it, so you're using kinesthetic, and you also hear as people talk about it. So whatever style of learner you are, it helps with that. So you can communicate yourself. And for extroverts and introverts get to build, so nobody's talking, you build your own thing, right? You get to process and think about it. And for the extroverts, you get to share in a group setting. So it appeals to all styles of learners, different personality types, and it also makes sure that everybody's voice is heard in the room. So in most business meetings, it often is a few people talking, a few people doing most of the talking, right? So 20% of the people do 80% of the talking. And most of the people and the rest of them are just sitting there. You've probably been in a meeting like this. I've been in tons of these, right? In a Lego meeting, everybody builds, which means everybody's talking. So every time you have a question, you get to actually hear from every single person in the room, rather than in a traditional corporate meeting, you hear about the person's perspective after the meeting. So you actually get to hear it all in real time in the room, which makes it way more effective and productive.
Yeah, and it's like a 3D activity.
And it's 3D,
so it's
yes.
not so easy. I think it's quite stimulating for the brain, right?
It's very stimulating for the brain. And actually, there was research that was done. So when we talk out loud, we use about 15% of our brain, which is surprisingly low. Like, think about, you're only using 15% of your brain when you're talking. When you build with 2 hands, you engage up to 80% of your brain. You're using, and we're also cross-lateral, so that means that if you're right-handed, when you use your right hand, it taps like your left side of your brain. When you're left hand, it taps the right side of your brain. So that's why traditionally left-handed people are more creative, because it's tapping the right side. So when you're using both your hands, all of your brain cells are being engaged, up to 80% of them. So what happens is that things from your subconscious will actually show up in the builds that you make. And I've had this happen for me personally.
Really?
So I'll put in things, and I don't know why. And then as I'm talking about it, I'll have these epiphanies, these aha moments. I'm like, oh my goodness, that means this, and I'm sharing with it. And I'm having these thoughts that I didn't even know were in my awareness until I'm starting to share about it. So you actually get even more insight than a traditional business meeting, which is crazy.
For me, it's always about drawing, but I never tried it in a Lego setting, but then it gives even more space, right?
Yeah.
Because you can go more directions.
And the Lego is easier for people to utilize. I've actually done sessions where people have never touched Lego in their life.
Okay.
And they create fantastic models. And the Lego is not so much about like it's not Lego Master. So it's not, I can make things spin around and fly in these complex builds. It's the stories and the metaphors that come from it. It's about the meaning that's attributed to it. So even if you've never played with Lego as a kid, it doesn't matter because you can still, it's about what you say about it that really matters after it. So
it's the narration that you add to it later, right?
Right.
Okay, so if someone right now doesn't have any process for innovation in their team, like how can they start? What would you say, like next week or next month, like how they can trigger the innovation in their organization?
I would first say watch my courses on LinkedIn because I can walk, it's pretty too long for me to explain on the podcast, but I have 5 courses on LinkedIn Learning. My newest one actually is called Design Thinking for Everyday Innovators, and it will walk you through 5 steps of design thinking. And design thinking is a methodology that helps you solve problems. And it starts thinking through ambiguity and defining the pain points and the problems. And it walks you through framing up the problem, creating solutions. So you identify actual ideas you'll create, then you'll prototype that idea, then you'll test the idea, and then you'll implement it. So there's 5 steps in the innovation process. So to go deeper, just look on LinkedIn Learning. I can actually give your listeners access for free. So remind me later, and I can send you the link to that. But that's a way they can start. But in actual practice, I would say, I keep going back to pain, but I want you to know that there's an unlimited way to solve any problem. And I think sometimes we solve problems without that aspiration of anything is possible. Literally today, especially with AI, anything is possible. Anything that you can create, there is a solvable thing for that, right? And I want you to push the boundaries on what that is to see what you could explore. So if you know that there's pains that involve yourself or at work or your customers, what would be like a big moonshot idea that you could create that could solve that? There's a solution out there that you can discover. And so I want you to push to hunt for those. And I think that probably the greatest thing that people don't do is to give themselves time to think creatively, like we talked about earlier, to give themselves that margin of time. One of the things I like to tell people is the more diversified your experience are in life, the better innovator you are. So the more that you do random things like, I don't know, maybe it's my first time in Warsaw, so maybe if I go to Old Town later and I expose myself to Old Town and see what's there, it'll fill my brain with new stimulus, new I call them dots, these little dots in your brain that your brain can connect to later on. And it may not be apparent to you that it's useful now, but it may be later. And a quick story that I'll share about Steve Jobs. So when he went to Reed College, back when he was a student, he attended a calligraphy class, and he attended it just because he thought it was cool. There was no sort of business value, right? He's a student, he doesn't know. So he takes this calligraphy class, and that was it. But 10 years later, when he was designing the first Macintosh computer, that calligraphy class came back to him, and he said, I want to have beautiful typography on the Mac. And so he designed it into the Mac, and it was the first computer with beautiful typography. So even though he couldn't connect it 10 years prior, he couldn't say, 10 years from now, I'm going to need this calligraphy class when I'm designing the Mac. But because he had that experience, he used it when he was designing it. So the more diversified the experience that you have in life are, so let's say you like music, right? Go to a concert, go check it out. Or if you're a foodie, right? Go eat some good, you never know what that experience that you did could be utilized in the work that you have today. This practice is known as associative thinking, and it's very, very powerful because you can connect unrelated items and put them together. It's something I passionately talk about. I have a course on it, but it's something that not a lot of people do because they don't know that this practice sounds a bit strange, right? To do random things, you can use it in your work.
Some people, especially I think in the IT space, e-commerce space as well, can close themselves in a box because there's so many like ideas, things about AI. You can actually spend the whole day reading and conceptualizing within just one very, very narrow space, in fact. So going out there, connecting the dots, I think it's a great idea. And finally, like, what kind of people do we need nowadays? Like, what are the skills and competencies we should look for in people to build teams that can innovate?
Yeah, I would say look for people that are curious, that sounds strange, but maybe are okay with breaking rules sometimes. They're not, you know, they don't want to just be told what to do. They can navigate in the gray. They like ambiguity. Not everybody does.
True.
You know, some people like to be, you know, tell me my job role and I'm going to go do it, right? If you're looking for innovative and creative people, you want people that have actually a diversified skill set. So ask them about their hobbies. You know, what do you like to do in your spare time, right? See if people have a diversified skill set. You know, ask if are you curious, or are you not curious? How do you describe yourself? You know, do you like rigidity or do you like freedom? These are some kind of cues in terms of what I would look for in someone that is more on the innovative side. Do you like to experiment, or do you like to do things that have always been done the same way? Would you like to pioneer something different, right? Or do it how everyone else does it, right? Where do you live in these spectrums? And you can find the ones that you can kind of tell where I'm trying to go with these answers. Yeah. Those are the types of people that would lend themselves to be more innovative, creative right off the bat. I think anybody can learn to be like this in terms of have more flexible cognitivity, but some people they gravitate towards this more than the others.